the question itself, how to cultivate an indigenous Muslim culture. I think that, to my mind, it's really very important to get clear about what the issue is. Because for me, the issue is not one of having to cultivate a culture, create a culture, bring into existence a culture. We should not imagine that whether we are immigrants or indigenous people, and I'll just leave those terms in their problematic format, you can understand what I'm talking about. But whether we are one or the other, we don't sort of exist in or emerge out of cultural vacuums. And so it's not as if we have to sort of create some culture ex nihilo, as it were. And this is especially true in the context of what we might call more indigenous American cultures, because I think that America is, in a sense, the sort of the wonder boy, or the wonder girl, however you want to think about it, of popular culture. I mean that has been America's sort of most enduring staple, in a sense. In fact, there are even some analysts that would argue that one of the things that always kept America ahead of the Soviet Union was that America had a popular culture that it could sort of disseminate throughout the world, via which it could reach hearts and minds in ways that the Soviets could never do. So, for example, if you go to Africa or you go to some parts of Asia and you ask them, well, name me a Soviet pop singer, they can't name one, right? But Snoop Dogg is known all over the world. And this, I'm not being flippant here. I'm being very, very, very serious about that. And so the idea that there is not a culture already in place, I think, I mean, this is problematic. The issue for us as a Muslim community, as I understand it, is not one of cultivating a culture. The real issue is, it's a long-standing issue for Muslims in the modern world, and that issue is the real issue is one of cultural authority. Because we're talking about a Muslim culture. We're not talking about any culture. We have a culture. We engage in cultural kinds of activities all the time. The confusion comes in by the fact that there is a question as to whether the culture in which we are in possession of is sufficiently Islamic enough. And so the real issue is how we come to terms with the collective cultural legacy of the Muslim Ummah, which is primarily located in the Muslim world. How do we sufficiently free ourselves? And I don't mean that in any kind of rejectionist mood, but I mean, how do we sort of loosen, as it were, the yoke of this cultural authenticity that is produced in another place, in another time, but carries the almost unassailable authority of being Islamic? How do we loosen that up to the point that we can indulge and engage our own cultural legacy, to the point that we may be able even to inscribe it with Islamicity?